A very common cause of concern in job interview is whether you'll get stuck at some point in time. And in today's video, I'm going to touch upon the more interesting scenarios that I know when it comes to getting stuck in job interviews. And the first one, probably the most common scenario, is when the question you're getting asked is framed oddly. A couple of examples here. A time when you were 75% through a project and had to pivot strategy to ensure its successful completion. The trick here is you don't have to be 75% precisely through that project. You have to be towards the end of the project, but the idea is that you have to pivot in order to ensure its successful completion. And by the way, this is on delivering, your ability to deliver. Or another scenario here would be, what's your biggest professional failure? And here there are a couple of ways people think about this. On first hand is the lucky scenario where you do have failures, but you're wondering whether that failure is appropriate to talk about in a job interview, and it most likely is, especially if you prepare them, of course, in advance a little bit. But the other scenario is that you talk about a big failure, and when I ask you the question this way, you automatically have a tendency to panic when compared to if I'd ask you, tell me about the failure that you have. Tell me about something that didn't work out your way, something pretty significant. Or another example. What's your most important invention in the past 6 months? This is another one, an invention, the most important invention in the past 6 months. Well, the idea is that you talk about something interesting that you invented relatively recently. So if it's 7 months, that's fine. If it's 9 months, yes, that's also fine. If it's 1 year, that could also be fine, so long as it's something interesting, something engaging, something that really showcase on your ability to invent, to innovate on these things. The next scenario where people actually get blocked quite often is they're getting asked broad questions, and this is especially for more senior types of roles. For example, if I'd ask you, what's your management style? That's a pretty broad question. Like, you would have to think, hey, what is the interviewer actually looking from me? So I won't insist too much on this one because it's for senior and director level roles, and I previously touched on this in these rather niche videos with examples of questions for these types of roles. Number 3 here, scenario where people tend to block, and this is more often than not in telephonic interviews. You often get blocked when the interviewer follows up on something with more specific details. Can you give me some numbers, some metrics? How long ago? Basically, when you prepare for a phone interview, you're, at least in theory, you're not expected to spend weeks preparing for that phone interview. And it's all that normal that most people don't remember all these details, so that's where you have a tendency to get blocked. Now, I would not actually recommend you to prepare for weeks for a phone interview just for the sake of remembering these numbers or these specific metrics. Simply because, I often hear this feedback from people that were successful through their phone interview. So the idea is that if you don't remember some numbers, well, try to not make them up, or try to estimate and try to make it clear that you're estimating to the best of your knowledge, or say you don't know, because you're in a phone interview. For the on-site interview, of course, the equation changes slightly, so you are expected to remember more of these details. Number 4 here. Number 4 is specific to on-site interviews and to the bar raiser round. The bar raiser is someone supposed to see if you can raise the bar in that company. So needless to say, it's their job to see how good you are at these things. Bar raiser also have a tendency to ask you questions that you cannot really find online, simply because bar raiser are supposed to come up with interesting questions. But more often than not, I've noticed that hiring managers, especially for key roles, the hiring manager is the one asking you the most difficult questions. But this fact that it's the bar raiser, if you spot the bar raiser, it adds an extra layer of risk in a way. But if you put it, just a simple interview and you don't care too much that they are the bar raiser, you take them for what they are, you should essentially be fine. Or if you have a tendency to get blocked, or if you happen not to have an answer to something, okay, you're fine, you move on, and the next question is something where you immediately get back on track. Number 5 here, the off-topic questions. So in a job interview, needless to say, you won't get asked only behavioral and technical questions. You may get asked all sorts of questions. For example, for AWS, especially for consulting roles, for senior consulting roles, they often ask you, okay, do you know how much money AWS did last quarter or last year? Many people don't know these things simply because they prepared on either the behavioral and the other part for the actual interview. And truth be said, it's not a key element to know specifically for this first layer for a job interview. This is something you can easily ramp up on. And again, my advice here would be to never give up in a way. So even if you might feel that you're done basically, and if they might play a little bit of theater there, you should always understand what really matters in that interview. So if they ask you a question that's off topic, but you feel like it is something you could easily ramp up if you get a job offer, and if you accept that job offer, I would say that to be straightforward, no, I don't know, but this is something I believe I could easily learn if I'll ever get a chance to work for you. That's the simplest approach. And last but not least, I've seen a certain behavior, a certain pattern of certain types of candidates, specifically candidates that prepare mechanically for interview. In other words, they prepare as many questions as possible, so they try to cover as many questions as possible instead of behavior. So instead of tuning out a couple of questions and feeling confident in themselves, or even worse, candidates then prepare cheat sheets with all possible questions in an interview. When they get asked a question they haven't prepared for, and what happens then? Well, the first reaction is that you think, hey, which one is the question? Or even worse, you search on your cheat sheets, and that takes you 10 seconds, and then you realize after 10 seconds, oh, I'm done, and I cannot even remember the question that they asked me. So it's inevitably that your chances to get to block here are exponentially higher. So that's why I would also, on one hand, don't prepare mechanically for a job interview, rather prepare, on your strengths and what you feel will improve the most your chances for this interview. And if you feel like you easily get blocked or have this tendency to easily get blocked, don't use cheat sheets, because they create this reflex that's, on one hand you will probably give great answers if the question is in front of you, but the downside of this is you haven't prepared for the question that you're, I would say, at least twice more likely to get blocked in this job interview. So there you go. I hope you found this advice useful, and thank you very much for watching.